Happy New Year, friends, and a merry 12th day of Christmas. We just got back from our Christmas holiday, and as a homemaker who has been away from her kitchen for too long, I've been craving a slow but productive day in my kitchen for a while now. It feels so good to get back into the kitchen and get some bread going and stock up on some weekly pantry supplies that I know I will want during the week to feed my family with. Today, I'm sharing with you a new sourdough routine I want to try out. I'm also going to make some cinnamon raisin scones, make some lunch and my homemade peanut butter recipe, and get some chicken broth going for dinner. I love making homemade bread with my sourdough starter, but it's very easy to get carried away and let it overtake my schedule. As a mom, a wife, and a spontaneously creative person, I really need a simple baking schedule so that we can enjoy homemade bread every day without me getting overwhelmed. This winter, I want to try making a bunch of bread once a week so that I only have to do it one time and then I don't have to worry about it for the rest of the week, but we still get to enjoy fresh homemade bread every day. So today, I'm going to make a double batch of my double batch sourdough recipe. So in total, this is like making 4 loaves of bread, but I'm going to combine it so that I only have 2 large batches to work with, and then I'll bake it in my Dutch oven. I'm going to bake 1 loaf tonight for supper, and then the other one I'm going to long ferment in the fridge so that when this first loaf is all eaten up, I can simply pull the other one out and it will be ready to bake. I'll link my sourdough recipe down below. As you can see, I got a little bit of that blackish water called hooch in my sourdough starter, but it's not a problem. I'll just dump the excess liquid off and use my starter as normal. This is just a sign that the starter has sat for too long in the fridge and has started to separate. As long as it hasn't been more than a week, I'm usually good to just dump it off and proceed to use my starter. Because I'm working with such a large batch of dough, I went ahead and poured out some filtered water into a jar, just so I could get some more running through my Brita water filter pitcher. I wasn't sure how much I would need. I know that I want a bunch of starter on hand to make some sourdough discard pancakes later on in the week, so today I'm feeding my starter with 200 grams of each water and flour. watched a YouTube video where another homemaker was using a bench scraper to do the final mix of her dough, so I thought I'd give it a try today. I mixed it mostly with my wooden whisk, but there was still some flour on the bottom, so I grabbed the bench scraper and just kneaded it using the bench scraper. It was nice to not get so much sticky dough on my hands, and I will definitely be doing this in the future. Now I'm going to cover my bowls of dough with some plastic wrap and let it rest for a bit before I start doing some stretch and folds. It's a surprisingly warm January day here. It's going to be 70, so this dough should ferment and rise well today. At last, it's finally time to try my hand at making some scones. I've been wanting to do this for a while, so I'm so happy to finally get to do it today. This is a scone recipe that I've made based loosely off my favorite biscuit recipe. I'll link this recipe in below. It's not a sourdough recipe, but because I'm milling my own flour, I don't mind doing some bread recipes that aren't sourdough. I think there are health benefits to still using some fresh milled flour even if it hasn't been fermented, as long as you don't have issues with digesting grains. I really enjoy having a few fresh mill flour recipes under my belt that aren't sourdough, that I can just whip up when I'm out of sourdough starter or don't have time to ferment anything. Because it's fresh milled, we still get good health benefits from this homemade bread. If you've been around on my blog or have seen any of my other YouTube videos, you may have noticed that I'm a very creative cook who likes to experiment, and I don't necessarily measure things super accurately. This has just never bothered me, and things usually turn out just fine and are very delicious. I think it all started when I saw my mom, who was teaching me how to cook, and she had a random scoop in her flour bin. She knew how high to heap it up to get a cup of flour, and she always eyeballed it. Watching her cook and bake that way growing up infused a love of eyeballing recipes and not worrying about getting a perfect outcome. You may notice in this video that I just grab a couple of handfuls of raisins, drizzle a couple of tablespoons of honey in, use a 1 cup to measure a 1/4 cup of olive oil out. I think sometimes we stress too much over the little things, which makes our daily tasks like cooking or baking more stressful than they need to be, and the results are usually still pretty good. They're edible, they're delicious. I rarely ever make something that is totally a flop, where we have to throw it away. And I honestly enjoy this freedom and enjoy the less stress of not having to follow a recipe super closely. Here I'm just pulling out a couple of jars of already milled flour that I keep in the freezer. I like to keep a little flour on hand to make sauces or to use to flour things. These cinnamon raisin scones turned out so nicely, and I drizzled on some more honey on top instead of making a sweeter drizzle out of icing sugar, and it was delicious alongside a warm cup of tea. was one of the first things I started making as a newlywed. It was one of my first swaps that I started making that I did not grow up doing, and in some ways, it's one of the first from-scratch cooking skills that I learned as a new homemaker. I've gone back and forth with making my own peanut butter and buying organic peanut butter from the store. It does save quite a bit though when I make it myself. It's not the best quality, but it is natural peanut butter when I make it, so there are no additives. It's just purely peanuts. One way I like to keep down the daily clutter around my kitchen and to keep dishes more manageable is to wash the big things like my food processor, especially the blade, right away. If I don't get to wash it right away, I will at least rinse it out so that nothing sticks. I typically don't load the dishwasher till after supper, but because I rinse things and stack them in one sink and wash larger things like the food processor and large bowls as I go out throughout the day, it only takes me about 15 minutes to do the dishes at the end of the day. If I don't rinse things out throughout the day, then it takes me 2 or 3 times as long to do the dishes. This is one little habit that I started this past year that has helped me be more efficient in the kitchen. The scones are done, so I think we're gonna have a little snack and I'll finally make some tea for myself. A little caffeine helps me as a busy homemaker, but I honestly forget to do it most days until later in the morning. It's something I enjoy, but it gets set aside for other things in the morning hour. Since I'll have to put some of this bread dough in the fridge to long ferment throughout the week, I'm going to pull some things out, see what we have, and use some of it up for lunch today. As I was rearranging the fridge, I noticed that we had some pasta and some chicken that needs to be deboned. I think I'll steam up some peas and make some homemade mayo and make a little chicken pasta salad for our lunch. Since we had a later morning snack and I didn't have any other bread made, I used the whole bag of peas with just a couple spoonfuls of pasta and some chicken to make this salad. It was a lot lighter of a meal since it did have more peas in it than pasta or chicken. It was quite delightful though, and even my children said that we should have this every day. It's always a wonderful moment when my 4- and 3-year-old compliment my cooking. I just deboned this whole chicken that I roasted the other day, so I think I'll make some bone broth with the bones and use up some of the frozen bones I have in the freezer. I'll add some crushed garlic, a whole onion, some salt, along with some roughly chopped carrots to make a nice little bone broth. It will slow cook all afternoon, and I'll use some of it for dinner. And then I'll let the rest of it keep cooking until the evening for more flavor. Thank you for joining me here at the Virtuous Home today, where we are learning to cultivate the good and the beautiful through food from scratch, slow productivity, and a handmade home. It was very refreshing for me to finally get back into my kitchen, make some bread, and get some other pantry staples made. I hope that you are inspired by this video and encouraged to tie on your apron strings once more and serve your family joyfully this next year.